Welcome to a Sunday edition, international edition of From the Ground
The
Up
best
podcast.
ones are not the best ones, but I love the international
You're
ones.
so partial to couples and internationals.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. And we just messed up our camera.
I'm partial to couples because they're like us and they're fun, and I'm partial to international.
They're like us and they're fun.
Yeah, and then internationals is because I like learning about how other people live and do things.
Especially where we're going to go today. If in South Africa, I mean, just the plethora of
this
reptiles.
Is our first. It's a new continent for us.
Usually we take it easy and we stay in Europe, but
that's taking it easy. Africa's not easy. Is that what you're saying?
No, we haven't ventured anywhere else.
We've done South America.
Oh, yes. But that doesn't count.
Why doesn't South America count?
Because I think Ray was in the United States when we did it. Plus, he's from America.
But we 90% talked about South America, so it counts.
Oh, yeah, of course. And I mean, South America and Central America is that's also our normal conversation, because most of the dudes that we have on here that have herped, they've herped Costa Rica most of the time.
True. That's what I was thinking of, is Costa Rica. And then we've talked a lot about Indonesia. Obviously, we've never interviewed or done a podcast with someone from Indonesia, which I want to one day, by the way. But we've talked a lot about, but we haven't talked about Africa at all.
We'll get it out of our systems right now.
We should strive to have a podcast with someone from every continent. Except Antarctica. I was about to say Antarctica's never going to happen.
We can find a climate scientist to come on if we wanted to talk about it. There's there's research bases down there.
You find that person.
Okay, we're on it.
Okay.
Theportcitypythons.com if you are interested in t-shirts like the one Melissa is wearing, as well as many other. Check out Theportcitypythons.com. And we have been doing this Facebook Live thing. We do 15 minutes Facebook Live every single day. And we're just talking about what's going on in our hatching season, since on these podcasts, we typically like to talk to the guests and not talk about our own stuff for too long.
Yeah.
Therefore, we get kind of our hatching season, all the details of that. We'll be doing that there. I may one time or sometime in the future, I may bundle a bunch of them together and make a podcast out of it. I'm not sure. So if you'd like to hear that, tell me, or just check us out on the Facebook Lives, because that's been fun to do.
Yeah.
And other than that, we have Patreon.
Patreon. Support us on Patreon. As you know, if you support us on Patreon, you get first dibs on our available stinks this season.
So animals hatching, animals becoming available, all that stuff goes on Patreon pretty much first.
Yes. Other than that, we will be at Havre de Grace show in Maryland, August 10th. There is UK Carpet Fest, August 3rd. There is Western.
That is in Birmingham.
Is it Birmingham? Is that how you say
yes.
it? Birmingham. Okay. And then Southwest Carpet Fest is in California, July 27th. At
Brian
Cusco's house. Today, we have on our guest. Oh, I feel like you say it better.
We have Theo Busschau.
Yes.
And he is an MSc student. In zoology.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I forgot the name
of the University of Stellenbosch.
Ooh, correct us if we're wrong.
Yeah,
we got a thumbs
up. Got it.
So many new words going on today. Theo, thank you so much for being here. And can you give us a little intro on what you do?
Well, as you said, MSc student from Stellenbosch. Currently, I'm working on geckos and snakes. So I'm looking at basically the patterns of forest living species along the east coast of South Africa, and then to try and see if there are breaks within those species, so genetic breaks, and if the breaks are similar between the different taxa. So that's essentially what I'm busy with now. Almost done. I'll be done in the next month. I'll be done with my MSc, and then it's on to bigger things, I hope.
Oh, that's great. And if you guys can hear in the background, in South Africa, they ignore the fire alarms, apparently. So there's some fire alarms going off, but you can still hear them good and clear. So if you're curious about what that is. But so, Theo, how did you get interested in herps?
Well, I started when I was very small. Since I can remember, I used to go to reptile parks. We had a very nice reptile park close to my house, or in Nelspruit in South Africa. And I used to go there quite often. I used to spend hours walking around the whole place. And then, when I was about 14, 15, I got my first bearded dragon, actually. And it just kind of grew from there. Then when I went to university, I started getting into more like field herping and things. Try and find as many as I can, obviously. And initially when I went to university, I wanted to be a vet. And then I decided, no, maybe I'll do like reptile veterinary or something like that. But then the one guy I went to see at Victoria, he told me he wanted to be a vet, but then he had to spay cats and dogs for about 7 years. And I was like, you know what, I'm not doing that. And that's when I started BSc, and I haven't looked back since. That's been the best choice.
So growing up, I'm assuming you grew up in South Africa?
Yeah, no, I've been here all my life.
So did you have any like experiences when you were younger with the native wildlife?
Which kind of experiences?
Well, hopefully the good ones.
No, well, I mean, if you think about if you think about the native wildlife, I mean, a lot of people think that we've actually got wild animals walking in the streets, but we don't. They're all in the parks. So I did live next to a nature reserve when I was a kid. So the most wildlife we had coming in there was, well, things like porcupines. There's some antelope, and I mean, lots of snakes, lots of reptiles. So obviously love that. But yeah, as a kid growing up, we used to often go to like the game reserves, like the Kruger National Park and things like that. But yeah, other than that, there's not really any exciting stories about the wildlife. Yeah.
So what is something that when you go out, I mean, what are some of your favorite animals to find?
Well, firstly, you always have to find something no one else has found yet. So I'm very competitive like that. But other than that, I like finding big things. So like the big water monitors, the big cobras, like the cave cobras or forest cobras. And I mean, I still haven't actually found a black mamba in the wild. Most of the ones I found was while I was working at a lodge, coming into the lodge or on call outs and things. I haven't actually found one just while I was walking out in the field. So I mean, that would be cool to chase it down and catch it. But yeah, generally I prefer finding the bigger things. Yeah, I don't know. It makes it fun. Yeah.
So how did you get into doing call outs?
So yeah, growing up in Nelspruit, there are a lot of Mozambique spitting cobras, a lot of black mambas, and then those guys they always need someone somewhere to try and catch them. I did my first call. I think I was about 16 or 17. Yeah, and I mean they just at that time they took anybody who could actually catch a snake. And then yeah, I mean you'll go and help out. Now it's a bit more tricky, like you need all kinds of permits and things. But I still help out every now and then when I go home, when I'm not at university. When most of the callouts there are either spitting cobras, snouted cobras, or the black mambas.
So you have to have a permit now to have a company that goes out and gets these?
Yeah, they don't really have a company. It's well, at the moment they do have a company. It's called Low-Felt Venom Suppliers. You can check them out on Facebook and things. But they rely on volunteers to go out, so you have to be trained to get that permit. Because otherwise, you can have any kid like I used to go out and catch the snakes. Someone who's not trained, and it's a dangerous situation for that person and the people whose house the guy's going to, and then also the snakes. I mean, you get these oaks who just buy tongs online, and they can damage snakes so quickly. So it's important to know what you're doing, to have the proper training, and then that permit basically just controls who goes and who doesn't go.
How does one get properly trained to handle a black mamba?
So in South Africa, there are quite a few companies who do these handling courses, just because we have so many snakes. So I think people feel safer if they know how to do it. So you'll see that they all go out, fast tongs, do these courses. I mean, there are a lot of people attending these courses. And then, I mean, that guy just shows you how to do it, how to handle them safely. especially up in the northern parts of the country or along the east coast, up into Limpopo and those places. There are a lot of black mambas. So I feel like those people feel safer if they know how to handle them, or if they actually just know someone who can come in and take them out.
Yeah. So from an outsider's perspective, someone who's definitely never handled a black mamba, it looks like a very fast and intelligent snake. So, I mean, how do you work with an animal like that?
I mean, I'm at the point where I'll just treat it as another snake. It just comes with experience. But in general, what I've seen is people have this very big stigma around black mambas and how dangerous they are. I think that person is 10 times more nervous than the snake. And I've seen if you come and you just go and take the snake out, the situation is so much easier. I mean, about a year or two, well, a bit more than a year ago, I had a call out where to catch one in a tree. And I mean, it took us more time to actually just find it in the tree, because as soon as you climb the tree on the one side, it moves all the way to the other side. You have to run to the other tree, climb up the tree. But once you're in the tree, they are actually very inquisitive. So all I had to do, I put my tongs out, and the snake actually just came down to investigate what these funny things are in the tree. And I could actually I grabbed it with the tongs, pulled it closer, and I bagged it in the tree, and it was as easy as that. So, I mean, if you are calm and you don't pay attention to all these stigmas and things, it is quite easy to do. But they are quite nervous. They are very alert, so they'll always be watching you, and they are quite fast. And now it's a big, fast snake. But yeah, like anything else, I mean, just to treat it with respect. It's so easy. And then, like the bigger things are actually easier to handle than the smaller things. I mean, it takes a lot more time for that big snake to come around than a little snake like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And spitting cobras, I mean, what kind of, how do you handle those, and what are some proper ways to keep yourself safe?
So the spitting cobra is the best thing. Well, I mean, cover your eyes. But with those, I've always had the motto, like, try and get it done as quick as possible. You don't go in there, and you don't want to tong, hook, and agitate the snake. A lot of times, if you go in there quick, bag the snake or get it in the bucket quickly, you can do it without getting spat. It's once you start irritating the snake again and again, that's when they'll start spitting. So yeah, I mean, the most important thing with them is just to keep your eyes covered. Try to get it done as quick as possible, and then also, well, keep your mouth closed or covered. So a lot of people have actually developed a hypersensitivity to the venom, and you'll see guys that get spat and they'll start getting rashes and things like that. So it's better for someone like me or the other guys who do the call-outs and stuff who do it regularly, to not be exposed to that venom, to try not inhale it. So it's a good thing to cover your whole face. I mean, it's not always ideal. I don't like it, but it should actually be done.
So have you had experiences where you were exposed to a certain degree?
I've never been spat in the eyes, so I don't know what that burn is like. They say it's bad, but I have had it in my mouth and on my face and on my skin. It tastes horrible, but other than that, there's nothing else. I mean, I also tried to photograph. Well, actually, last December, I tried to photograph them spitting, and that was quite challenging because you need to have the right shutter. You need to like get it right at the exact moment it's spitting. So the guys that did the call-outs, like, I asked them to please pass them my way before we release them. And then I would grab a couple of photos. So there, like, I had my little brother helping me. You'll see him on some of my Instagram posts. He's 11 now, so he's a little kid. So he was my guinea pig. He had a big, big plastic lid from the Tupperware thing. And then he like ran in front of the snake to get it to spit. But yeah, I mean, you kind of, you just work around it. I mean, even like my brother, he could hide behind the thing, so he didn't get spat too much. But yeah, I mean, that's the most exposure you really get.
And when you're photographing something like that, I mean, how do you stay cognizant of where your hands are, the focus of it, and everything going on at the same time?
So those cobras and things, they can be very difficult because initially they just try and get away. So you have to really try and get them to hurt. But once they're standing and they're hurting, it's relatively easy. They could keep that pose for quite a long time. But the worst thing, like for me now, when I photograph, I like looking into the open space of the camera. So now, if I'm alone, my movement is over here the whole time, so the snake just keeps looking at me. So you have to, well, I sometimes have the funniest poses. So I'll be lying down and I'll put my foot out right to the side, or I'll move my foot, and then so the snake can look that way. So yeah, I mean, it's just that initial bit to try and get it to sit still and hurt, and then look in the right direction. But it's way easier if you have someone helping you, because then they can distract the snake, make sure the snake looks nice, and then you can just take the photos.
In the chat, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Sparen's Wild World said that he forgets to mention he took the most beautiful photo of a spitting cobra ever.
I did. So the photo I took was actually she asked me to take it. And yeah, it's actually, she's bringing out a book. It should probably be in the book. I hope it made the book. No, I'm sure it did. But yeah, so that's for that. You'll see, you can go look on her Instagram. I'm sure she has a link there for the book she's bringing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll link your Instagram below.
Speaking of Instagram, in your bio, you say that your pictures are just from your mobile phone. And for us, people are always so surprised that 98% of our Instagram photos are just from his phone.
But his are also a lot better than mine.
Well, I have to ask, what phone are you using? Or like, what are you using to take those pictures?
I don't even have the best phone. I've got a Huawei P8 Lite 2017. But the trick about like mobile photography is just to get the focus right. So what I would often do is, well, also the angles are quite important. So I'll actually turn my phone upside down, so then you can get most of your photos on the same level as your subject. And then just the most important thing is really the focus, just to make sure you're not zooming in, just moving the phone closer. And yeah, I mean, if you nail the focus, then the photo is already 100 times better. And then also, I mean, sometimes, or most of the time, actually, I edit them in Snapseed, just to correct the light, because your phone will often just overexpose it or make it super blue, and then it just looks rubbish.
Yeah, and
a lot of people. No, Carol.
I feel really kind of stupid in the way that I try to get as low to the snake as I can, but I never thought of just flipping
turning
it over.
the phone upside down. We've literally never thought of. We're like this, like trying to be so low, and we could just turn it upside down.
So life hack right there.
But with you, you're always he on his phone. He has this like pro mode where you can like edit all these things in the middle of taking it. And I feel like
do shutter
I
speed
feel like you wouldn't be able to edit all that upside down.
Well, I'd have to set it all first.
And then quickly turn it. But then I feel like, I don't know.
But that will drastically change my life a little bit.
Right. But it's always so interesting how phones view things differently. Like I have an iPhone and he has a Samsung Galaxy or something like that. And pictures look very different on each. Mine is much more blue when you look at it on my phone than on his phone.
Yeah, but you see things like that is also the screen. Some screens are bluer, some. So, I mean, that's why I edit them afterwards, make sure it's not as blue. But yeah, I think that's just like the different manufacturers and things. But I prefer the photos on my phone a lot of times more than the camera. I feel like you can get a lot closer, you can get like better angles. I often get people actually asking on my Instagram, what lens did you use? And then they get so sad when I tell them it was just my phone.
Well, I think everyone who hasn't risen to a certain like skill level in something, they want to think that the reason why they're not at that skill level is because of the equipment. They don't have whatever equipment it takes to do it, when in reality it's just the act of doing it.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, for Instagram, like the photos aren't even the best quality. Even if you upload from the best camera, the photos, they're not the best. So if you can get the right scene, you get like everything as best as you can, really, all those photos eventually are on the same playing field, if I can put it that way. So yeah, you don't need the best, you just need to create the best image, really.
Yeah, and I guess part of the fun or part of the skill is actually finding the animals. It seems like you have great luck also finding the animals.
I mean, that's what it looks like, but that's actually me going on field work, trying to find the species that I'm working on, and all the rest is just bycatch. So I did a lot of field work looking for my geckos and my snakes. So I'm working on the blind snakes or the little thread snakes. They're about that big. And then, well, I traveled most of the eastern half of the country. And, I mean, throughout that range, there are so many different species that, I mean, you go out into the field today and you'll find so many things you aren't actually looking for. But a lot of what I found were actually new species that I haven't seen before. So, I mean, that's the fun part of doing field work and having a target species, because you happen to find all these other animals. But eventually, like, if you can't find things, you just end up not even photographing anything because you're just looking for your target species. And yeah, like I said, it can be so difficult sometimes.
And how did Instagram come along? Was that just something to like keep you busy while you're doing field work, or?
I don't know. I can't even remember when I started with Instagram. But I think it just kind of came from where, like, I used to take photos on my phone, and then I would now just upload the phone photos on Instagram, and then like the normal photos I'll upload on Facebook every now and then. But yeah, it's just that, well, Instagram is just kind of a way to share the photos that I take on my phone, really.
Right. And what are you particularly interested in, like the thread snakes and like little fossorial snakes and crazy stuff like that?
No. Basically, how my project happened is I started my undergrad. Well, I started working in my supervisor's lab in my second year. So that was about 6 years ago. And eventually, well, then I started working on these fossorial skinks. I mean, they're about that big, they've got no legs. I did a lot of genetics on those. And eventually, I published that as well, it was part of my honors project, published that. And then now, I mean, obviously, I've got the skills now. I learned a lot about that. And then my supervisor got a grant with part of a bigger project. And he asked me if I want to join him for MSc or a master's, because he's got a bursary that he could offer. So initially, I said no, I'm going to take the year off. But then after the year off, I'll come back and I'll do that. So in September the next year, I joined them on a field trip. And then basically now they didn't have anyone working on reptiles yet, and the project had to be something to do with forests. And so then I came up with this project. So in this project, or well, along the East Coast, we've got three reptiles. So the geckos called the Pondo flat gecko, the thread snakes called the forest thread snake, and then in the tail black snake. They all kind of have similar distributions. So that's kind of where I came up with the idea to work on them. To now see if the forest fragmentation along the East Coast, like with climate change and, well, past climate change, resulted in similar patterns within these species. So, yeah, the thread snakes are very difficult because they're very difficult to identify. I'm busy writing that section of my thesis up now, and within the one species that I'm looking at, there are potentially 11 different species. So very difficult to, well, tell them apart morphologically. Yeah, so I mean, they're not easy snakes to work on at all.
And is that part of, I mean, their fossorial nature or the size?
Yeah, so with these fossorial species, I mean, with the skinks and things, we see the same thing, where like the high diversity of them or the genetic diversity is masked by the conservative morphology. And now, I mean, with those, they all blind. They don't really have eyes. They just have these eye spots. They all kind of have very smooth scales, and there aren't really any selective factors if you're living underground. So there's not a lot of things driving the difference in morphology. And you'll even see things that are distantly related that live underground that eventually start looking the same, just because there's kind of one selecting factor. It's to be able to burrow in the soil that you're growing in. So that makes working on them quite tricky. And a lot of people, well, there's been a study about, I think it was 2009, where they looked at this group and they saw that there are very different or genetic groups, but no one, well, tackled them again, because just for that conservative morphology, you can find genetic species, but then you're not able to describe them because the morphology isn't different.
And what does a snake like that eat?
So these actually specialize on the larvae of ants. So they go into the ant colonies, and they'll seek out the larvae and they'll feed on those. That's predominantly what they feed, or what we know they feed on. I mean, we don't actually know a lot about these snakes, but by looking at when some of them that we've dissected and things, that's pretty much all they eat.
What's a specialized diet? Just that. That's wild.
And can the ants actually hurt the snake or kill the snake?
They can if they wanted to, I guess. But there's an idea that they're possibly masking themselves with the ant scent, or that there's been kind of like an evolutionary arms race where they're able to go in and the ants can't detect them. A lot of the ones that I found, like once you lift those big rocks, you'll see them sitting right in the ant colony, and the ants just ignore them. Some people also have the idea that the snake could actually lay its eggs in the ant colony and then possibly mask the scent, mask their own scent, or mimic the ant scent. So the ants would actually carry that egg and they'll nurse the egg as if it was an ant egg, because they've got very similar sizes. But yeah, there's not a lot of proof of this. It's just kind of a theory going on, and it kind of makes sense. Like, I mean, if you're such a small snake, and you go into the wrong ant colony, those ants would eat you up so quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know that they were oviparous. So what kind of, I mean, that must be a small egg.
It is quite a small egg. Yeah, so the ones that I've dissected, they had about 3 or 5 eggs that they, well, 3 to 5 eggs. And yeah, I mean, it's very, very small. So in the big ones, it's, well, actually about half the size of like a Tic Tac. So they tiny.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's kind of funny that like the first thing you said is I like finding the big things, and you're caught studying like the smallest things.
Oh well, yeah, I mean, all the people have taken all the projects on the big thing. So that's a fun part about working on the smaller things, because no one has done it yet. So your findings, a lot of your findings are brand new, and no one has seen anything like that before. But yeah, I mean, it can be quite tedious to work on. And then the other snake I work on, the tall black snake, that's a big snake. So that's like about 1 meter, so like just over 3 foot. And they're quite awesome, but they are a lot more rare than the smaller ones. Like, you have to do a lot of searching in the forest to try and find them.
Are you doing any like radio transmitters or anything like that?
Oh, that's the new in thing, but no, no, I just do the genetics. So I'll go into the field, collect some snakes. If it's in a new area, we'll euthanize them. But if it's in an area where I've had many before, I'll just take like a scale clipping or a tail tip or something like that, and then I'll look at the genetics on those.
So you're looking kind of trying to find morphological differences between different localities of snakes?
So I've done that. So there's a lot of vulture specimens as well. But for that, I'm only looking on the little snakes, and it's actually, I wouldn't say it's new, but no one has done it before. Where I've measured, it was quite a lot of work. I had to measure all those small scales, and those scales are like 0.1 millimeter. So yeah, it's very, very small. Some of the measurements I did. So all of that under the microscope, and now the results actually show that there are actually certain differences between these groups. So basically, what I do is I use the genetics as a backbone to try and find the morphological differences between the different populations.
Great. And do you have any interest in just doing like genetic studies, or kind of wow, I'm losing the name for it right now.
What?
But essentially,
I have no idea.
Finding new species and creating binomial names and everything like that.
So taxonomy, is that the word?
Taxonomy?
Yes, the taxonomy.
Wow.
Okay.
Isn't it?
You should always know that word. Okay.
No, I mean, I enjoy it. I think I'm just in it because I know how to do it. But I've been thinking of doing a PhD, and if I do a PhD, I'll probably go into more ecological things. Try and do maybe some behavioral on snakes, and because I feel like I've kind of driven into one direction, but there's still so much more that I could learn. So I enjoy what I'm doing. I want to get experience doing some other things, but I think I might actually come back to doing this. It is fun, and I mean, I love it, like doing all the analyses, doing the field work, and then finally getting that result, or getting a tree, and then you see, well, all these interesting patterns, and then trying to figure out what drove those patterns, or why this population is different from this one. But I love results. I like just seeing results. It's awesome.
So away from the like fossorial stuff, what are kind of the environmental pressures that you're seeing that are, affecting snakes?
Right.
So the main conclusions that I've drawn from all of this is, historic climate change. So from let's say the late Miocene, which is about 11 million years ago, the world, everywhere started getting colder and drier. So then habitats like forest would become smaller. So essentially the forest would contract, and then you'll have basically two patches of forest. So the snakes in this forest can't get to this one. And then over time, they'll just become different things. Or this forest might be cooler and this one might be warmer and wetter. So they'll adapt to different environments. Then once the forests expand again and these populations possibly get back to each other, or they connected again, then these species are so different, or these populations are so different, that they are actually different species. So that's the main thing that I've seen in my studies, is that the climate change over time has driven population fragmentation, driven diversification. There aren't really anything else that I could pick up in my analyses. I mean, I'm actually planning on, after my master's, for the publications, to look at some modeling to see how the climate change over time drove the diversifications of the populations. But it could be like fragmentation of the habitat, even just the climatic variable, like acting directly on the snakes. So as you know, snakes are cold-blooded, so they rely a lot on the climate that they're in for survival. So you might get that one climate, like it might be cooler, and the other one warmer, and then they'll adapt to those different environments. So I mean, there's most of the things you come up with are very theoretical. It's very difficult to actually test these. But with some niche modeling and things, you could actually see or try and tell the difference between habitat fragmentation and just different climatic variables.
And as far as the climate goes, I mean, you were obviously talking about 11,000 years ago and it cooling, but short-term climate change due to like CO2 or emissions and stuff like that. I mean, what kind of effect could that have on populations?
I mean, it can have quite a big effect, because these snakes, they can't disperse very far. So I mean, especially the smaller ones. So they're quite vulnerable to climatic changes, because now, if let's say in the next couple hundred, or even the next 50 years, it becomes too hot or too dry, those forest patches would actually shift higher up onto mountains, or into deeper valleys and so on. So then if you're a little snake and you're stuck where there is no forest anymore because of the habitat changes, you're either going to have to adapt very quickly, which is unlikely in 50 to 100 years, or you're going to go extinct. So, I mean, there's that. But then at the same time, it also could drive some diversification. Snakes that are already in these kind of habitats, or pre-adapted to those habitats, might actually expand their ranges. So yeah, there are different levels, different things or different species or species groups are affected differently. Things like the bigger black snake that I'm working on, they're able to obviously disperse a lot further than smaller ones. They even have larger distribution. So with them, if the forests do actually shift higher up or lower down or so, those populations are actually able to shift with it, and therefore they can mitigate the changing climate. It's these things with the very restricted ranges or that aren't able to disperse that are vulnerable to climate change.
So what would be, do you know like the typical range for the black snake? What would that be?
What do you mean?
As far as like one individual, like how far would they travel within a given year?
I don't know. I've actually thought about this, about like, I mean, even bigger snakes, if someone's actually worked on that. But I don't think they travel too far. I mean, this is just my idea, because in these forest patches, a lot of these forest patches are actually very, very small. And they'll basically just stay put there. They wouldn't move too far. So I think I can't even give you a size of how far these snakes would move. But generally, the fossorial things, they don't move too far.
Right. And I mean, South Africa, just give us an idea, because I mean, neither of us have been there. We have no idea. So, I mean, to us, you know, we think Africa is like going to be some wild place, but it seems like it's very fragmented where you are.
I think that South Africa is different. So in my head, South Africa is different than the rest of Africa.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't know, like I've always separated that country in my mind than the rest of Africa.
Yeah, so South Africa, there are some wild parts that are, well, I would say relatively wild, but it's not as wild as the rest of Africa. Like, I mean, if you go up from like Botswana and you go further north, there are some truly wild areas there, where like the main road basically goes through a game reserve, whereas in South Africa, all our game reserves are kind of closed and fenced in. I also think it's to do with like the population of South Africa. So a lot of these people live right on the borders of these parks. So if you wouldn't have fences, you'd have a lot of wildlife, animal or wildlife-human conflict. So that's why I think in South Africa it's best to actually have all these fences and not have everything wild. But yeah, I mean, we've got big cities and like Joburg, Cape Town, and I mean a lot of the guests that I get that come visit, they're actually surprised that we do actually have like civilized areas, especially like Cape Town. A lot of guests come to Cape Town.
And what would be like typically people's attitude towards wild animals or, you know, snakes that they may find in their house or something like that?
You mean like South Africans?
Yes.
So, I mean, I find this quite funny. A lot of South Africans, they're quite scared, first of all, but they're not used to having these things, and it doesn't make sense because a lot of our suburbs and things are right on the borders of nature reserves and things like that. So, to me, it doesn't make sense, but I grew up with an interest. So I guess it's just that people, even now, while we have all of these wild areas, they still don't allow themselves to be exposed to the nature of the area. So they don't actually know about about the animals that they are finding. So there's just that lack of knowledge. So therefore, a lot of people are scared. There's also a lot of like cultural beliefs with things like frogs, chameleons, and even snakes. So a lot of people that find them would just kill them on sight. Some of them they wouldn't because they're too scared of what the animal would do. But there are a lot of like old beliefs that come into the way people interact with the wildlife.
So similar a lot to America. We talked about that a lot.
Especially in the Southeast, there's a lot of conflict, but people, their first reaction is to kill it.
But what is the community like of people who keep and breed snakes in South Africa?
Well, I mean, I'm not too clued up on that. So when I was about 14, I used to work in a pet shop, helping people with snakes and things. And then I was in it for a long time up until I was about 18, 19. When I came to study, I kind of left that. So I'm not part of all those circles. But yeah, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of breeders, there are a lot of people that are into keeping indigenous things, there are a lot of people that are into keeping more exotic species. But yeah, I'm not sure how that scene is going. There seems to be like a separation in South Africa with people who keep things and then people who don't keep things and are more into the field herping and so on.
Yeah, that's not much different from here. We just have like some subtle crossover. And
right. There's not much crossover, I would feel.
But people, I feel like, are starting to work together more so now than they have in the past. And that's kind of something that we, like personally in small ways, but also the community as a whole, are trying to see ourselves as, responsible and able to coexist with, say academics, field herpers, all the different subsets of herp people, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, even in South Africa, like between the herpers, there are even like these little cliques, and everyone's always competing with each other to find the best. And you'll have your little group of friends, and you'll share all your things, and then you'll have the other group that gets jealous about it, and they just won't let anyone in this group know where they found anything, because these people aren't allowed to find those cool things. So yeah, I guess anyway, there's all those politics about that, and then I mean the field herpers, I'm one of them. You get quite bleak when you see one of these guys who keep things finding like a rare adder or like a cool cobra or something, because then you're like, oh, he's definitely poaching that and selling it to someone else. So there are all these little groups in the herp community, really.
Mm-hmm. And
sorry, no,
because I'm gonna bring it back, because I was just curious, something you said earlier as far as the cultural beliefs. Like, what are some cultural beliefs around herps?
Oh, should have asked mine.
Well, I mean, I don't know all these beliefs too well. But I know there's a story for KZN that there's a big black mamba with like a feather on its head. And you can see, like, when the wind blows over the sugarcane, you can see him slithering over the sugarcane. But there's like an idea that it just started with the wind actually just blowing the grass, so it looks like a snake. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to come and cheat people's beliefs here, because I don't know too much about it, so I might get it wrong. But yeah, like things like chameleons. There's a big thing about chameleons where people are just super frightened about them. I'm not sure exactly what they believe about that, but yeah, that's as much as I know.
That seems to be the least like
scary and violent.
Maybe they don't trust them because they think that they actually change colors like that and blend in. So
yeah, it's not something to do with the color changing ability and the eyes that go all over the place. I was on field work, and there was one crossing the road, so I just quickly stopped my car, jumped out, grabbed the chameleon, and there was a guy next to the road. He was looking after cattle or something, and he came to me, like, he chatted with me a bit, and then he saw the chameleon and he just ran away. Like, he didn't want to be close to me. So, like, I think it was maybe like 50 meters away from me, and I was told him to come back. And then, we chatted about it a bit, and eventually, he asked me for money. So I told him, okay, I'll give him some cash, but then he has to hold the chameleon. And he was just like, no, it's not happening. He's leaving. I still gave him the money because I felt bad. But yeah, they've got very strong perception about some of the reptiles and things.
I'd never guessed chameleons could ever be intimidating in any sort of way. But people probably feel that about some things that we freak out over,
Yeah, for sure. We definitely have our own cultural things that.
Are you scared of spiders?
What'd you say?
They're scared of spiders.
Yep.
Yes. This person included.
100%.
So that's one thing I don't get. You'll get people, they'll hold the biggest snake, they're not scared of anything, but then you bring the smallest spider and they freak out. So that's one thing that I can't understand.
Yeah, it's some like learned behavior to where we just, for the most part, don't trust spiders.
The multiple legs and the weird fuzziness.
Which is like the same reason why people dislike snakes, though, is because the lack of legs and the seemingly just like
the lack of things shouldn't scare you. The surplus of things should scare you, not the lack of things.
Well, that's your own opinion, I suppose.
But that's because I've normalized the snakes now at this point.
No, I think it's the whole idea of the legs.
Thank you. The legs. Anything, if anyone closes their eyes and you feel like 8 things crawling up, you're going to be freaked out. I'm sorry.
I must admit, that's one thing I hate, is to have something walk on me and I can't see what it is or I can't find it. But I get over it very quickly. That's one thing that I don't like that. And then the other thing is slugs and snails. I hate touching slugs and snails. That's the one thing, like, I'll find it and I'll just leave it where it is. It's just the idea that like grosses me out.
Yeah, I went to like a summer camp when I was like a 10-year-old, and we all slept in these lean-tos in the woods. So it's like,
wait, what's
it's
a
open.
lean-to?
It's just something leaned against a tree that makes a shelter that's not even really that effective.
Okay.
Imagine putting a door against a tree and then putting like a tarp over it, maybe, but we didn't even have the tarp part. So we all woke up with like slugs on our faces, and like kids were screaming and crying, and
what kind of summer camp is this? It just seems
you
like
can't control the slugs.
That's like Naked and Afraid. That's just putting you outside.
And then they had to like check us for ticks and stuff and weird stuff. Yeah.
That summer camp did not follow regulations.
No, that's probably not allowed anymore.
No, you don't just put kids outside with a.
But I gotta agree, like slugs are kind of weird and creepy and slimy.
It's not good for the skin. So, well, you had a good facial there.
Or it's like, some people use the like blood sucking leeches and stuff like that are supposed to help infections or something like that.
I'll never touch a leech.
Not for me.
I had one leech stuck to me once, but I freaked out so much I just flung it off, and then afterwards I was quite disappointed. I just didn't just leave it to see what happened. I was young. I think I was about 10 years old or something like that.
Yeah, I've done that, and I see it. If you see it, like your first reaction is like just swipe it off as quick as possible.
Yeah.
But what are I'm not really that well versed in the wildlife in South Africa, but I think it was a picture of a armadillo lizard. Is that what the species is called? The one that has like the armor plating and they roll up?
Yes. So yeah, I found that one a couple of months. Well, actually at the end of last year, I think. I found those. Well, secret locality. I can't tell anyone.
Or you'd have to kill us, right?
Yeah, something like that. No, but I mean, people poach those things, quite a lot. So we try and not let everyone know exactly where you found those. But yeah, that was quite a cool find. I mean, people loved it on Instagram as well. No, it's just because they're so unique, and like, I mean, when they roll up like that, they roll up to protect the soft belly, and then they just expose like all those the scales, the armor plating. But once they've actually rolled up into that little ball, it's almost impossible to get them out. Like, they just won't let go for anything. And so like a lot of them, well, I found quite a few. So you just have to leave them there and wait for them to eventually let go, and you can try and quickly take some nice photos before it rolls into a ball again.
I guess like the kind of the like super herp nerd mentality is like, I want to see it in situ because it's easy to get it rolled up. But I think like the Instagram thing is like the rolled up picture is going to get you like so many more likes.
Yeah. So that's why I went for it. But they're quite difficult to get out of the crevices. So where I found them, I mean, the weather wasn't that great, so that they didn't come out. So you'll find lots of them just hiding in the crevices. And then you have to really try and be careful, because with them, once they go into the crevice, they actually lift their backs up, and you can't pull them out. So they'll lift their backs up, wedge themselves in, and then take their tail and cover their body with their tail. So you can't even put your finger in and try and pull them out, because that tail just wedges in there as well. So I mean, people who go out to look for them, you have to be very careful, because sometimes what they'll also do is just go in deeper and deeper and just wedge themselves in so that they themselves can't get out of the crevice. So when I went, like, I had a noose, and I just very carefully noosed them around their neck before they got too deep, and then you can get them out of the crevices. So yeah, I mean, that's a super cool find to get. But yeah, seeing them like properly in situ with like basking and things like that, it can be quite difficult, especially, well, it depends when you go. Because a lot of times they are actually just like in the crevices hiding.
And is that an animal that's protected via CITES and isn't, collected and imported?
Yeah, so all of the girdle lizards in South Africa are on CITES, so you won't be able to, well, I mean, there are some people who actually get them out. I don't know how they manage that. But yeah, it's very, very difficult now to export them, especially wild caught ones. So there are some captive, kept, girdle lizards from the genus Smog. So those are the dragon lizards, like the sun gazers and things. And those, if you got them on permit, they're all microchipped. So that's a very strictly regulated, species or group of species or lizards.
And is that something that, what's like the general behavior of that animal? And besides the rock crevices, I mean, what do they eat?
Well, I mean, I think these guys just eat pretty much anything that's small enough for them to fit in their mouth. But yeah, you'll see like where they occur, there's lots of beetles and things like that. So they mostly feed on that. Like, I'm not too well versed on the ecology of them. But yeah, from what I've seen, these lizards would eat pretty much anything they can fit in their mouths. There are some groups of them, or of these girdle lizards, that are thought to be omnivorous, so they'll eat like little berries and things like that as well. But those would be quite seasonal, like when there are actually food for them to eat.
Gotcha.
And are there obvious differences between the wild caught ones and the captive ones? Like with our snakes,
or if you've had experience with captive ones,
right.
Captive ones, I'm sure, are harder to come across.
Well, I haven't seen a lot of captive ones. There are stories that they haven't been successfully bred in captivity. A lot of the ones that people might say are captive bred, they're actually just what we call now captive born. So the guys would go out, catch the pregnant female, and then she'll give birth in captivity. And then oaks would, sell those as captive bred.
Or are captive bred for the sake of CITES paperwork. I mean, we can say that. I don't care. Like, there's scumbags out there.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably seen like when people sell things, then they'll put like CB next to the name, but they won't say what that actually is. So that's where the whole thing of captive born comes from. But yeah, in general, like when people keep the stuff like the armadillo lizards, or when they catch them, you can kind of see what population they come from just based on the color. Like some of them are more yellow, some like the one I have, they've got these black faces and things. But yeah, I can't tell if there's a difference between the captive ones and the wild caught ones. I think most of them are actually just wild caught.
And are there any ideas on what's affecting their populations?
I mean, most of the things that people say is just collectors going into collecting. Because you can, like on a good day, you can collect like almost like 100 lizards quite easily if you find the right population. I mean, I know there used to be like big exports of them before they got strict with that. I think that's the main thing. I mean, fires and things like that can be an issue, like especially in the habitat we have here. It's called fynbos. So the habitat should burn roughly every 7 years or so. But then if you get like a man-made fire going through those populations too soon, then they reckon things like the beetles and stuff, there's not food for them, so they would be less. But generally, I can't see that would affect them too much because they go and hide in these crevices. And I've got a friend who actually worked on some snakes, and he saw that like when a fire comes through that area, the rock cover actually prevents, or mitigates a lot of the fire that comes through. So it basically buffers out all of that heat. So the animals are generally quite well protected in their little crevices and things.
Yeah. So do you guys do like things like prescribed burns like they do here in the States?
They do in some areas. So like in some of the game reserves and things like that. So up like north in the Kruger Park, they would do like section burns. But there's like always changing like theories on whether they should be doing that and whether they should just be leaving it for the nature to take care. Because I think the last study showed that they were actually burning it too frequently, and then another study would come and say, no, they're burning it too little. So these theories are always changing, and the management plans are always changing because of that. But generally, here in the Cape, I think there are enough natural fires coming through that you don't really burn the site. I think the fires are actually too frequent, and sometimes they've shown that it's actually man-made. So then it's like takes a lot of work to try and stop these fires, because they will wipe out a whole mountain at once, and then they'll get closer to where people are. Things it's very difficult to get them to stop. So I don't think in this region of South Africa they'll do prescribed burns like that. No.
Yeah, that's something to where, like, when I lived in Colorado and there's a campfire goes awry, and then all of a sudden
the whole side of the thing,
the whole mountain's on fire, and then.
But that's pretty much what happens.
Yeah, and then I thought you were touching me to ask a question, but as far as hazards besides fire, I mean, what are you dealing with in the field when you're out in the field?
Well, me myself, I don't know, ticks maybe. But generally, like doing field work in South Africa, a lot of the places you go to, I mean, it's quite rural, and I can't speak the languages of those people, and a lot of people live in poverty. So you're always kind of like wary of your things and where you are going. Like the one reserve we went to in the Eastern Cape, we drove in the bucky, parked the bucky, got out for maybe 15 minutes. When we came back to the car, they smashed the windscreen. Well, the windscreen had like protective film, and they were trying to cut through the film to get inside the car. And we were literally, it's in a reserve. We were like, I mean, not even a couple hundred meters away from the car, and it happened. We didn't even notice that it happened. So it's a sad reality, but that's one of the things I fear the most going into the field is where people are. So I always try and go to areas where there aren't people. And unfortunately, with my field work, like a lot of those places were actually like right next to communities and things. And some of them I just didn't stop there just because it wasn't safe for me to stop there alone and park the car and walk 100 meters away from the car to go and sample.
I don't want to get like political or anything, but from what I've heard or like I've been told, there is a big disparity in South Africa between the like high class and the high economic level and the low economic level. Is that true?
They say so. I mean, you can kind of see it. A lot of the country, it does live in poverty. So you'll drive through like the city, and then right on the side of the city is, well, like the slums where you've got like cattle crossing the main road and things. So you do definitely see those big extremes in a lot of places in South Africa.
And I bet that makes it interesting for going out and herping and things like that. Like the more snakes are going to be probably out in the slums. But
well, just like here, the further you go out, the more you have people who may not have steady city jobs, which are going to be a whole different socioeconomic,
might have guns
situation. Yeah, I guess. Do they have firearms is the question.
Yeah, so you'll actually see in those areas. I've been sampling in some of those really poor areas, and the wildlife there is basically non-existent. Just because, I mean, like I said, these people are poor, they don't have money, so they kind of live off the land. And even though it's illegal, they feel like they've got the right to go in and hunt their little antelope or set traps for these antelope. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's just me not finding things, but you can kind of see a trickle-down effect where these disturbed areas, you can't find as much as you would in the really pristine areas or areas that aren't, where there aren't a lot of people actually coming into those forests or natural areas like that.
So is hunting actually illegal in South Africa or just on the game reserves?
No, hunting is legal. You have to get a permit to do that. But yeah, these areas that I'm talking about, it's like protected nature reserves. Most of the forests in the country are protected. but you'll still have communities that live right on the forest that will go in and set their snares and their traps and things. Like the one place I was in the Eastern Cape as well. So I was actually just going through the forest, and I saw this group of guys, and I thought, okay, no, this is great. I can ask them where I need to go, where I can sample, where they have seen these snakes that I'm looking for. Because generally, if they've seen snakes there before, it's a good place to go and look for them. And as soon as I got closer, these guys just ran away because they were obviously there illegally. And like I just wanted to tell them, like, bro, come back. Like, I just need some help to tell me where the things are.
I'm not going to get you in trouble.
And as soon as they heard my car, they just, dashed off into the bush. And I was like, these oaks were perfect because, I mean, they go into the bush the whole time. They know where everything is. But they didn't give me a chance.
So is it hard to find like a reliable guide?
Okay, well, there are two aspects to this. So I'm also a field guide, like freelance now. So I'll take tourists into like Kruger Park and things like that. So local guides in the areas. So if you go to a remote area, like let's say St. Lucia or like Cozy Bay and those places, you can find a local guide from the village. Actually, when I was sampling there, they wouldn't give me a permit to go sample if I didn't bring a local guide with me. And a lot of them, actually, they know the area quite well. They know the species that you're looking for and things. They know where to find them. But then those are those guides. Then you get guides, or kids, I could say even. They'll finish school, they won't know what to do, and they'll go do a guiding qualification. And now this guy doesn't really have a background of the species. He just, or the area or the nature, he'll just go in, write the qualification, he'll get the minimum pass requirement, and he'll go take tourists into, the game reserves and things. But now, as a tourist, you don't know everything. You don't know what really is going on. So you get these guides that go and they just, I will say, bullshit their way through the experience. Because they'll have an answer for every single question, no matter what they're saying. And at the end of the day, those tourists don't know. So they give a good review, and these guides, they get away from it. So now the boss is happy because the tourists are happy. And it's actually becoming a bit of a problem because now you'll get these guides coming into like the private lodges and things. And the lodge will get away with paying the minimum wage because these guys accept it. But then you'll get a guy that stays at the same lodge with the same pay for many, many years to come. There's no growing. And a lot of the people are quite upset about this because you kind of get away with just like bullshitting your way through guiding and things. So like when I guide, I'm quite passionate about sharing real information. And if you don't know, you tell the people you don't know. But I get really annoyed with hearing people on another vehicle just going over and making things up as they go. So yeah, I mean, there's a big kind of like an issue with the guiding, and then like people actually not being able to grow in the industry.
And then those tourists go home and they tell their friends and family all that, kind of misinformation and not the true things, and then it just continues to spread.
That's true. So I mean, it's not that everybody just like speaks rubbish, because now you also get things where, let's say for example, I'll park my vehicle at a sighting, I'll tell my guests things, and then another guy will come in, he'll tell his guests the stories, and then sometimes those stories aren't exactly the same. But now you also need to remember that, like where I come from, my mentors told me stories. I mean, I associated those stories with what I see, and I drew my conclusions from that. Then the other guy, he had different experiences. He saw different things. So the stories often vary. I mean, it's not that I'm lying to my people or so, but you can see when someone is just speaking nonsense or just telling the biggest lies. I actually once had same scenario. I parked my vehicle. Now I've seen lions with my guests a few times already, and I told them stories about how the lions suckle from, or the cubs suckle from the same mom. So you might have smaller cubs and larger cubs suckling on one female while the rest of the females are gone. And that's kind of what a lot of people think helps the success of lions in the savannah. But now the other guard stopped, and he told again another story where it's not like a mutual suckling or altruism. It's like kind of parasitism, where the cubs are actually parasitizing off another female. And kind of just as he was finished saying that, you had the big cub of that size, and then the little cub all suckling on the same mom. And then, like, mom, I guess, heard the story, so they kind of had a bit of a chuckle of what was happening. But yeah, those stories is kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say the guy was lying, maybe that's what he was taught. But then that's where it comes in, where you need to kind of interpret what you are seeing, and not always just stick with what maybe other people told you, and maybe even just go do a bit of your own research, which is quite important, and I think is lacking in a lot of guards in South Africa.
Absolutely. And is it, as far as the mom goes, is that because the females hunt, so they just want less females out of the game?
What do you mean? So with one suckling and then the rest leaving and so on? Yeah, so I mean, you'll often get, so when the moms actually, or the female lioness, when they actually go off hunting, it's not that they always leave a female with the cubs. I think it might just be those scenarios where the one female might have a stronger maternal instinct, so she'll be more like worried about her cubs, and stay close or come check on them more regularly, while the rest are gone. But you'll find sometimes, like things like leopards, even they can leave their cubs alone for up to like 24 hours while they're gone, looking for meals, or they're even just patrolling. And I mean, that's when the cubs are obviously most vulnerable to predators and things. And you'll often see, because now in these like the private game reserves, you actually get a chance to see how these animals work, because you can see when the mom left, and you can stay with the cubs maybe for a while, and you can see how naughty the cubs actually are once the mom is gone, and how vulnerable they become. And sometimes it's so surprising that these cubs survive while the mom is gone and not able to protect it. So I mean, what they'll also do is the females would sometimes move the cubs, or they actually do this quite often, move them from one area to the next, so that that scent doesn't become too strong in one area to attract predators and things.
And as far as tourists go, obviously they're vulnerable. You don't know what you're doing. You may not even know the language. So how does, say, if we went over there, how do you protect yourself as far as finding a proper guide and everything like that?
So, I mean, it's not as dangerous as people think. And most of these parks, I think the animals are quite used to the vehicles. So if you just stay on the vehicle, there's no real danger involved with that. Obviously, don't get off the car, don't get off the vehicle. But if you stay in the vehicle, there aren't really any dangers there. You do sometimes get guests that go by themselves to places like the Guru Park, and they'll get out at the most random places and walk into the bush. I heard actually a story now at the conference that I was. The guy was guiding in Namibia, and I think he was doing some research there, but he had a uniform, and then he came to the one dam, and there were these French, I think they were French or Italian, I can't remember, girls that were sunbathing there, topless, right at the dam in a game reserve. So the big crocodiles, lions, and everything, and they just there sunbathing there with no worries. So those are dangerous situations. So if you come to South Africa, don't go sunbathing topless in a game reserve. But I mean, if you stick to the rules, you are quite safe.
Yeah, I would say if you're listening to this and you're like, you have a little bit about animals, I don't think you'd be messing around like that.
Well, you'd hope not. I mean, sometimes people who know animals are the most dangerous to take on safari, because they think they know, but they don't actually.
Oh, anything I see, I want to pet.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I mean, when I did my the guiding courses, when I took my year off, I was in a lot of trouble, because obviously I was catching all the herps, I was lifting all the rocks, and the instructors just weren't having any of that.
Yeah, I'm guessing you would probably frown upon just a normal person going flipping rock because you never really know what you'll get.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true. And I guess those instructors, they didn't know who I am, what I know, and things like that. I mean, if you are in the middle of the bush, you don't want someone getting tagged by a venomous snake. That would be the worst scenario.
Is there like what is the infrastructure like as far as when you have a snake bite? I mean, somewhere out there, are you able to get like airlifted out and stuff like that?
Yeah, so most of the game reserves or the lodges, like in remote areas, and even these, like training facilities, they've got set protocols of what happens and who you need to phone. And there's a company that runs all of this. So they've got like helicopters and things kind of on standby for emergencies like snake bites and things. They can, help you quite quickly.
Do you have a similar thing where, I mean, say in the snakes, in the States, if you get tagged by some type of pit viper and you need crow fab or something, it's like $20,000 a vial. Is it a different situation over there?
So I actually saw on Facebook the other day someone posted some prices. I think the polyvalent antivenom goes for about like 1,500 grams. So what's that, like $100 or something? So those are so that you can use for the mamba, the cobras, puff adder, gaboon vipers and things, and then you get the monovalent, which is now for like the worm silence, only for the worm silence. And that goes, I think it went for about like 10 grand, but I'm not sure. Sure exactly how much, but yeah. So with a big black mamba bite, you would need about like 8 vials of polyvalent antivenom. So let's say about $800 is just for the antivenom, and then obviously all the doctor's costs and all those things kind of come with it.
But that is really not that terrible.
Yeah, not bad.
But how big of a threat are things like mamba bites? How often?
I'm not sure exactly how often they happen. The mamba bites, I don't think are as common as things like stiletto snake. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a very small, well, not very small, but it's about that size. A black snake. It's confused with the blind snakes. So you often get people that just pick them up and they think it's harmless, but it has a big hinged fang in the back of its mouth that opens up, and it can keep its mouth closed and tag you while its mouth is closed by just flinging that fang out. And I mean, with that, they don't use antivenom. But they cause a lot of necrosis and tissue damage and so on. And then you also have the Mozambique spitting cobras, a lot of bites from them. And yeah, with those, a lot of people actually get tagged while they're sleeping. So while I was doing some of my guiding courses, the one guy got tagged in his bed. So like he got tagged on the collarbone, and luckily it was a dry bite. So like everybody freaked out and things, but after half an hour, so he didn't have any pain, and like cytotoxic bites, they meant to burn quite a lot. Didn't have any pain and things. They still rushed him to hospital, but he was fine. So yeah, I guess that, like those are some of the more important ones to look after. Mamba bites generally aren't that common, but it is important if something like a mamba or a Cape Cobra, striped cobra, tags you to get to hospital very, very quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess that goes with any snake. But
any bite.
Have you gotten the chance to see stiletto snakes in the wild?
I've seen a few of them, but not as common. I just haven't been in the right area to see them. But you do get them where I'm from, Nelspruit. You do get them quite often there, but I haven't seen one maybe for like the last 5 years or so. I haven't seen one. It's just because now I've been living in the Cape, or Stellenbosch and Cape Town, so you just don't get them there.
Does South Africa have boom slangs as well?
Yes, we do. So we've got worm slang all the way from the north along the coast down to Cape Town. So yeah, they're relatively common. I've only seen about 3 or 4 of them in the field. The rest are like call outs and things. But yeah, I mean they are dangerous. They drop supposed to be the most venomous snake in South Africa. But the venom is also quite slow acting, so they're not as dangerous, and they're also super docile. But there's also this misconception that because they're so docile and the fangs are back fang, or they are back fang, that you can handle them without having to worry about being tagged. But if they want to, they can tag you wherever. They can open their mouth quite wide. So they say they can tag you on the palm of your hand if they really want it. So it's still not a snake you want to mess with.
Wow. So is there like that backwoods mentality of just like pick it up kind of thing? Like people will mess with snakes, just something like a boom slang?
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, I'm sure you guys have it as well. The free
Yeah.
handlers that go out and well, they just want to show that you just be nice to the snake, and then the snake will be nice to you. You don't have to worry. But I personally have a big issue with those oaks. I can't stand it because I mean they say people aren't stupid and they aren't going to copy you, but people do copy. I mean that guy, there was a point in his life where he had to try it for the first time because he had to have seen it somewhere to know how to try it or something like that. So we definitely have those oaks, and we try and like not encourage that behavior. Every now and then, someone will post something on Facebook, and then you'll have the one school of people be like, "No, don't do that. You're an idiot. You're irresponsible." And then the other people that support him, and most of the time, the people that support him don't actually know reptiles or snakes, so they'll think, "Yeah, he knows what he's doing. It's okay." But it really isn't okay. I mean, it's a big risk you take that you don't need to take. It's kind of like handling anything. You can pick up something like a brown house snake 100 times and it doesn't tag you. Most of the times it does actually tag you, but yeah, it's just an example. You can pick it up, doesn't tag you, and then the one day it tags you. The same with the venomous snakes. I mean, you can do it 100 times, nothing happens, but that one day you pick up the wrong snake, the snake is in a bad mood, it tags you, and then you sit, well, you could almost die. And it's just that risk is not worth it.
Yeah. And that's something that if you are told your whole life that something is potentially deadly, unless you saw someone to say that that's okay, or to be like, oh, he did it first and he survived, like, why would you ever do that otherwise? Unless you have an example of
and
someone
still,
doing
if you
it.
saw someone pick it up and he survived, I still wouldn't touch it.
Your mentality should, like, you should say, oh, that's just an idiot. But for some reason that he'll also tell you some facts and stuff, and they're like, oh, that guy's an expert.
Yeah, I should pick it up now.
So yeah, so you see, you often get, well, I wouldn't say often because you don't get this happening everywhere, but I mean, it would be kids that are inclined to now, let's say a kid that's maybe 14 years old, he's been keeping corn snakes like since whenever, and now he wants to try and get into like keeping hots or like finding more venomous snakes. And then now unfortunately, this guy is his mentor, and I mean, then he goes into attempting this or trying it, and that, like, I mean, that's where the dangers comes in. Is that these people who are free-handling, they kind of act as mentors for kids, and often those kids can't, or even people who don't know. So let's just say not just kids, but even people who don't know, these guys act as their mentors, and then you kind of naturally fall into that. And you, while you don't know reptiles or don't know the community, you don't know who is the correct mentor to follow. So you kind of just go with it. I'm an example of that. Like when I was a kid, like when I used to work in the pet shops and things, I had a mentor, and I remember buying a baboon viper, and this guy came and he picked it out with his hands, and I was like, "Are you sure you meant to do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, don't worry, like it's fine. You can see it's super docile." And eventually, like I came to the point where I realized, well, this isn't the right mentor for me to be having. And you kind of learn by learning more. You learn who you should be following and who you shouldn't really be following. There's kind of this idea that I have is you like you start off with nothing or knowing nothing about anything. And then you slowly acquire knowledge up until you get to a point where you think you know everything. And that's where I think a lot of the dangers come in. Because now you think you're at the top, you think you know everything. And then you just learn a little bit more and you realize, oh, no, wait, I was wrong. I actually don't know anything. Then you get back to the bottom. And I think once you get to that point, you can kind of call yourself an expert then. Because the point you realize you don't know everything, you surpass knowing everything, then you kind of are an expert in my mind. That's how I think it works.
Absolutely. And what that takes, I think, though, is being a self-driven learner as far as doing the research yourself. So say there is a person who trusts their mentor all the way, and then their mentor is that guy. You were enough of a self-learner where you probably did research elsewhere and was like, oh yeah, this guy maybe
we
not the
shouldn't
best
hold
choice.
Kaboom Vipers.
That's true. I think it's important most of our discussion about the guiding about this, as if you have that mentor, you can always go back to the books and see. And then, you should have the guts or be able to ask the guy, well, listen, where did you get this? Like, where did you get this information? Because it's not what I've seen. And that self-learning thing is a very important aspect with reptiles and everything in general, I think.
What made you go the academic route rather than the private route?
I don't know. In South Africa, it's kind of the thing you study or you finish school, you can study. And this was kind of just the direction that I went in. I never, while I was at school, I never thought I was going to go into herpetology and things. I never really knew. I thought I was going to be a vet, but I think that thought was kind of drilled into me since I was a kid. Where you like animals, and then your parents are like, "Oh, you're going to be a vet one day because you like helping animals." And so that idea kind of stuck up until the point where I had to now decide what I'm going to do. And then, like I said, that guy told me, you don't want to spay kittens and things for 7 years of your life. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into biology. And yeah, it's been awesome. So yeah, I don't regret the decision. Sometimes I think oh yeah, what else would I have been doing? And I can't think of anything else.
And what are your plans after you've completed this degree?
So I don't know. I kind of I've actually signed some forms today. I'm gonna be guiding in Dubai for about a year, 8 months to a year. So that actually starts September, and it's just a short contract, so it kind of gives me time to think of what I want to do. But I think after that, I'll probably come back. Maybe I'll go somewhere else, and I'll look at doing a PhD. But like I said, I want to do something a bit different to the taxonomy or the systematics and things.
Going to Dubai is like traveling a thing that you want to do more of and finding herps all over the place?
Well, yeah, I'm super excited to see the Cerastes and the Echis and things up there. So it's the sword scale vipers and the horn vipers. They only have about 12 snakes there, so I'm going to find them all. But, I'm kind of one of those guys, wherever I go, I have to find the snakes. I have to find the wildlife there. There aren't a lot of places I want to go, but I definitely think Australia is on the list and South America. South America is definitely on the list. So we'll see. After the Dubai thing, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've got some time to think about that.
And Dubai also screams like gas money and tigers on gold leashes and giant Burmese pythons. So that sounds fun too.
Yeah, so my idea was that could be what it is, but I've read some things online and I heard some things from some friends and stuff that it isn't as hectic as what they show on social media. Apparently,
Lamborghini before you know it. Don't worry.
Oh, well, I hope so, actually.
Right? That's a nice upgrade.
Just as a tip, they'll just give you one. Where, as far as Dubai goes, You have like living arrangements, or do you live in like you live in the city, or how is all that gonna work? Are you excited?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty excited just for the new experience. I'm not sure exactly. I know the company I'm going to, they give me accommodation and they cover most of anything I need. So that's why it was a great opportunity. I mean, they cover my flights there, they cover accommodation, they cover the visas, they sort everything out for me. So basically, I'm just finishing my thesis, um, going home, getting on a plane, going to Dubai, and then I'm going to face it when I get there, I guess.
That's amazing.
So with your degree, you kind of have lots of options. I don't know if you know what people typically do with this degree. I feel like in the States, just go work at a zoo.
They typically don't field guide in Dubai.
Right.
Yeah.
You get your zoology degree and you go work in a zoo. But like, what is in South Africa, what's the common thing that people usually do with this degree? Or is it truly like widespread?
It is widespread. I mean, you can go into anything. So in South Africa, there's this idea that, well, most universities give you a double major. So my undergrad is biodiversity and ecology. You go to some of the other universities, it would be zoology and like entomology or something, or botany and zoology. And so it gives you a much broader, a lot more options of what you could be doing. But a lot of people, they go into research. So pretty much what I'm doing already. You could be a researcher at a museum, go work at a university, you become a lecturer. So those are generally the options that people go to. Some people go into consulting, so you'll be like an environmental consultant or a specialist consultant for some of the larger companies. Like consulting is kind of where the money is at. So if you're doing it for the money, that's what you would be doing. But in general, the guys that are really passionate about their research or the things they're already working on, you would end up going to work at a university, or like a research institution, where you can focus on the things that you are interested or your work as a researcher.
And is there any animal, as far as whether herps or not, if you had the choice of doing anything, what would you like to study?
Snakes. Yeah, I can't think of anything other than
Any
that.
species?
No, I mean, I think with this field, you'll kind of go where the work hasn't been done already. And what people typically do is they'll go into work that they know or species that they are familiar with. You often see with like the supervisors, or the professors, they'll like maybe have started something in their PhD, and then a lot of the work that they do subsequent to that is kind of based around more or less the things that they started. So I mean, with the systematics and the taxonomy and things, you'll start working on a project and you'll see, okay, there's something interesting there, but it takes years and years and years before you actually get to that. So then you start working on that interesting bit, and then you'll find something more that's even more interesting, or like a couple more interesting points, and then you start focusing on those. And so you just basically build up this whole thing around the taxa that you are working on. So that's kind of like why I said I would go into more ecological things, is just to kind of not steer myself into a direction already, and kind of just broaden my horizons in a way, to look at other things and learn other things of other species and stuff like that.
It seems like the job that you have in a way is you get to follow your curiosities in a lot of ways.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, a lot of these guys, like, I mean, a lot of guys also go for where there are potential gaps and where they can find studies and things. But I think a lot of people just go where they've got a hunch and they kind of follow that hunch, and make something of it. So yeah, like in this field, you are quite kind of free to do whatever you want to do, get into anything you want to get into. And then, I mean, the only like thing that holds you back is finding funding. So like what people do, kind of what I did for my project to get the funding and the bursary and everything. design my project around what the funding body is looking for, kind of.
So what is typically, because I mean, here I know snake research isn't exactly the most funded area. So what kind of, do you have to like tie it into something bigger?
Yeah, so my project forms part of a bigger, so it's called like the Forest Biodiversity Project, or it's funded by the National Research Foundation and the FBRP. So it's just basically funding bodies. And they would have, say, like areas that need research or that they are looking to fund. So they'll fund, say, taxonomy, and then they'll kind of have, it's like an ad, and they'll say there is like a grant available. So now you apply with or like a supervisor or principal investigator would then apply for this grant to work on this group with all the criteria of what the funding bodies are looking for.
Sweet. And can you like go wherever you want? Like, would you ever want to do your PhD in like the States or in Costa
other
Rica
parts of
or
Africa or
yeah, or
like
other
that.
parts of Africa?
I would definitely. I mean, I'd like to do it. Like the ideal would be like Australia or South America. But the problem with that is like trying to find funding and like trying to get in with someone who has funding or something like that. I think that's always the biggest thing with research. Every now and then there are good opportunities that pop up where, say, like professors are looking for someone to work on this project, and then they'll say it's with a full scholarship. And well, I mean, those are the golden opportunities that you need to go for. So yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna now for the next year, like kind of keep my eyes open to try and find an opportunity like that.
I think for us, as well as probably like most of the listeners, Australia is like
the golden place.
Like that is really what you shoot for to one day hopefully get to Australia. What are you so interested in, about Australia in particular?
I think, well, the thing that I want to see the most is definitely taipan. Just because everyone always goes on about how dangerous they are and they're so crazy, like venomous, but like I've got mambas here just to kind of like see the comparison with those. That would be cool. And like I mean, I love monitors, and so like that finding like a big Parenti and things that would be awesome. So I think it's mostly like the reptiles that kind of got me to want to go there. Other than that, yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think like a big saltwater crop would be awesome.
And not to mention, I mean, just Australia is so big with so many different kinds of climates and so many different kinds of animals that it's like
4 different places.
In order to cover anything, I mean, it's all separate trips,
It's and it's, I mean, a lot of it is really wild, and I mean they've got so many unique things there. So yeah, I think like, I mean, if you go there, it won't be a weekend. It will be a long time to try and find everything.
Yeah, and you're not just gonna go from Brisbane to all the way north to find your jungle carpets and green tree pythons. Like that doesn't happen in a week. Or I'm sure Eric and Owen may try on their next trip.
I mean, everyone tries. People try, but I think not that many people are successful.
And then the brave, I guess, go into Central Australia and try.
I mean, that would be awesome. Like going into like those truly wild areas where there is pretty much nothing. But it's like back on that, we often get like, well, tourists that come here and then they'll want to see everything, so they'll like message you. I'm in Cape Town. Where can I find like a black mamba? And like, oh, you don't get black mamba here. Like they're all the way north in the country. You go there. So yeah, like I mean, a diverse country like South Africa, it's very difficult to see things. I imagine Australia is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, and something that, I mean, people probably want to hear about and we didn't touch on yet as far as South African reptiles go is African rock pythons.
Yeah, so
have you had encounters?
Say again?
Have you had encounters with any African rock pythons?
Yeah, so where I'm from, you'd get them quite often. And they are now the ones where we are, it's called the Southern African python. So it's Python natalensis. The African rock python is Python sebae, which is way north. So they split those into different species quite a while ago, I think. But yeah, I've got them, well, little ones like this in my house, and then, well, big ones. I think the biggest one I caught was just under 4 meters. So yeah, I've seen them quite often. And then like my mom's got like a little plot or farm kind of set up where she's got horses, and the guy who works there, he often sees a big python. That's all I get from him is big python. But yeah, so they showed me where it was and things, and then I actually found the droppings of the python. I mean, I think the dropping was about that size, and then in it were a set of horns of a klipspringer. So it's an antelope. I mean, that antelope is probably about that big. Yeah, so they get super big, and they're right there in the town, and people just don't see them that often. So it's actually amazing how they can survive like in, well, kind of like semi-urban environment.
So it's kind of a snake that, I guess, by its nature has worked alongside humans, even though it's huge, and like you would think it wouldn't be able to hide very well.
Yeah, so that's a place like Nelspruit where there are patches of natural habitat, and it's surrounded by natural areas. But then you get things, well, back to the Eastern Cape, where there was actually a population that they think is completely wiped out by people. So people do hunt them for meat, and there was actually one on Facebook I saw, well, in this week, where friends of mine posted a thing where the guy got given the python at a pet shop, and one of these, well, we call them witch doctors or sangoma, offered the guy like 18,000 rand for the python, because then they'll take that python and then sell bits of it for cures for all kinds of things, and he'll make even more money from that python. You'll even see at the pet shops, like while I used to work at the pet shop, these guys would come into the pet shop and they'll want to get hold of these pythons. And most of the time, we just try and not sell it to them, even though like the boss I had, he could have been quite unethical, like he wouldn't care. But we would try not to sell it because they'll offer a lot of money just for those pythons. So I mean, through that, in the natural environment, those pythons were kind of wiped out, like places like the Eastern Cape.
And are those witch doctors, I mean, is that an issue as far as do they also like cure snake bite and stuff like that when you're envenomated?
Yes, they do. There are all kinds of stories of what cures snake bites. I remember once one of my friends, he lives actually up the road from me, he phoned me, he said, my garden has been bitten by a snake. So I asked him, like, explain the snake, explain the situation. And he tells me, no, the snake is this big. He saw it, so he punched the snake, and then the snake bit him. So, I mean, I didn't buy the story, but he's adamant he punched the snake, and when he punched the snake bit him, and this guy was like frozen, he couldn't walk, and he couldn't even speak. That's and how much shock he was, and he just wanted to go to the supermarket to buy like I think it's magnesium or something, these little metal things that you must drink in the woods. I'm not sure what it's called, and then he'll be cured. That was his thing. So we went to the hospital with him initially, and like he just said no, he doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to be here. He just wants to go to the shop just to buy these things. Then he'll be fine. So eventually, but now like I was about 18 years old, I didn't know too much about like being in shock and things. But then the guy's mom came home and they took him to the hospital, just gave him some pills and it was fine. So I think he was never tagged by the snake. I think he just got like it's like a branch or something just nabbed him. But yeah, so there are like all kinds of funny stories about how to cure these snake bites and things. But yeah, I think it's crazy.
Generally, it's not the same defense you can take against a shark or anything. You don't punch it in the nose to get a snake away.
Yeah, don't punch
That's
snakes.
probably exposing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some funny stories of the way like people will kill snakes. Like, I mean, some people spray them with like doom, like insect repellent or insect killers, and Yeah, and then also all these like stories about how to keep them away. Like you have to use like all these cleaning chemicals, and you plant these plants in your house, and then the snakes will be gone. But obviously none of those things work.
My favorite is they sell this like snake repellent for Western diamondback rattlesnakes in like predominantly in the South. And then there's all these pictures of like an Atrox on top of the bag of repellent and stuff like that. It's amazing.
Yeah,
So
people still buy it.
Yeah, I know. We've got the same thing in South Africa. So there was at his face this guy. It was actually a bit of a joke, like on Facebook. So he had this like snake repellent company that comes to your house, and they'll spray your whole house for a certain amount of money, and then they guarantee for the next year you won't have another snake in your house. But now, what's the chance of you finding another snake in your house? Like, how often do you find a snake
in your house? Right?
But then, if there is another snake in your house, they'll come and they respray your house for free. This was the thing. But none of those repellents works. I mean, you can find a snake, you can spray that repellent around it as much as you want. It's just going to go straight over. The best way, obviously, to keep your house snake free is keep your house clean. So, because I mean, obviously, the rats and things come. And then if they're not there, there won't be snakes.
You're like, I wonder why there's snakes here. There's just like all this scrap wood in my backyard hanging out.
You'll be surprised. I had a call out in Stellenbosch and the lady told me, they've never seen snakes here. Like in like all the years they've been living here, there's never been a snake. But the house was just so dirty, and there were like rat droppings all over the kitchen. And she told me, no, it's under the stove. Like when I got under the stove, there was like a whole rat nest like under the stove. And now they ask me like, how do you keep it away? But like, I mean, I'll tell them keep it clean, but it kind of feels like I'm insulting these people because the house is so dirty. But then I was like, how are you surprised that you have snakes? You've got rats. Like maybe get rid of the rats. Like that would be a problem in your kitchen.
But, you have an all-you-can-eat buffet under your sink and stove. Like,
what do you expect?
That house was so cluttered I couldn't even find the snake.
Do you ever, I mean, I'm sure you have, get the call like, it's venomous, it's the scariest snake in the world, whatever, and then it's just this
it's
little...
like a 12-inch house snake or something.
Yes. I get those. You get them quite often. I mean, I don't do too many call-outs, but you do get them from time to time. The best was now December that passed when I was home. So my friend phones me, Chris from the venom supplies or local venom supplies. He tells me, they've got a spotted bush snake at the hospital. So I was on my way there, so I go past the hospital, stop there. I'll just go in with a pillowcase because I think, okay, I'm just going to find the snake. Spotted bush snake is a small, like little green snake, is harmless. So I walk in there. So the nurse, I think, at the front, she tells me, the kid saw it, but the kid is in surgery now. But he said it was a green snake that just went up the tree after a lizard. But then she's like, but are you sure you're capable of catching it? So I'm like, I'm going to pull a case, like, don't worry. Because we know the common green snake there is a spotted bush snake. She's like, but the kid said it's 3 meters. So I'm like, okay, well, the kid obviously over-exaggerated. So I walk around like to the window where the kid saw the little green snake, and like I look in the tree, and there's a huge black mamba. Like I think after I caught it was like 2.6 meters or something like that. Like it was big. And I mean, then I obviously walked. I was like, I'm not capable of catching it. I need to go back to the car. And then I got my tongs and things. And then I mean, it was obviously a big show because now I have to climb the tree like at the window, and everyone was freaking out. Like everyone was just closing their windows because now there's this huge snake. But I mean, I got it quite quickly and I removed it there. So I mean, you often like on these call-outs, like people will give you a description and then it's just nothing like they describe. Or like the embarrassing ones is when like the lady would phone you, she's freaked out. There's this huge snake like in my shed, blah, blah, blah. And then you go there and you remove the box and it's this little snake. And then she's like, no, it was bigger. No, it wasn't. It wasn't bigger.
But I guess either way, you got to be prepared, whether they say it's a small
to...
snake and it's a giant snake or big snake, little snake, venomous, non-venomous.
I normally take it like, I mean, open for anything when I get there. I don't often listen. Well, I do listen, but I don't often really pay too much attention. I mean, there was one call out in Stellenbosch. The guy phones me, tells me there's a python in my garden. And so I was like, you don't get pythons in Stellenbosch and Cape Town. So it must be a puff adder. So I go prepared for the puff adder, and there's this huge boa constrictor. So it's obviously someone's escaped pet, but it's like on a farm, like far from any towns and things. So I don't know how it got there. But yeah, I mean, I got that, and yeah, that's my brother's pet now.
Repurpose it.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about like poaching and people getting things from the wild and kind of the issues with that. Is there any sort of like organization or governing body that's working to change the laws or anything like that for reptiles and native species?
I mean, different provinces have their own rules and their own like regulations, and they enforce things differently. So, like here where we are, you need permits for everything, like indigenous, exotic. But then if you go to KZN, there you can keep indigenous things without permits. So, what often happens is people would collect something somewhere, like wherever, take it to KZN, send it from KZN to Joburg via the right channels, because now you can legally keep it in KZN without permits and things. So you can send it to Joburg via the right channels, get a transport permit, and then automatically that animal becomes a legal animal. So now they've got all these rules, but then enforcing it becomes a bit tricky, because a lot of the people that do these, that go check your house and stuff, they don't know the species that you have. They don't know the reptiles. Even when I applied for sampling permits at some of the places, they'll just give me a permit for a gecko, and then I'm like, this isn't the right species of gecko that I applied for. So that is a bit of a problem, like enforcing those rules on the reptiles and keeping them and stuff. Even though in some areas they are quite strict, but there's always these loopholes of how to get through.
Absolutely. And is it as far as like things like invasives, like obviously there's a boa constrictor out, and it seems like, you have pretty decent habitat for a lot of different species of snakes. Are there any invasive species in South Africa?
No, not really. There are like the regular sliders, the little terrapins. You find them in Durban in some ponds. Apparently there are some in Joburg, but I'm not too sure. And that's pretty much, as far as I know, the only real invasive. It's not even invasive. It's just an exotic species that found a way to live there. Because now in South Africa, like the boa that came out in Cape Town, one winter year will remove it very, very quickly. I mean, it gets super cold here. But then if you go up north to like Limpopo and Mpumalanga, where I'm from, there the climate is a bit better. So one that gets out there could survive for a lot longer. But I don't think we really have any invasive reptiles like in Florida. That's ridiculous. But yeah, they are scared of it. They do prevent it, or they try and prevent it by implementing new laws. So there is a law now that you can't keep boas without the right permits. I don't think you're allowed to import them even anymore. So that is a bit of an issue that's going forward, because obviously a lot of people have these things. But personally, I don't think they would actually be able to escape and establish themselves in South Africa. There are people that think that some of the areas like Durban, Joburg, where there are a lot of keepers, when those snakes escape, they're going to be able to breed because the climate is right and stuff. But that's yet to be proven.
Yeah.
That I was just about to ask, like, are the import-export laws very strict from South Africa?
I think it's like I said, I'm not too sure about the like captive breeding and things like that. But I think it is relatively easy if you know the right people. Like, for instance, if you know people who have done it before, who already know the channels, and I think it can be quite easy. I know there are people that export like I said, those girdled lizards, some of our chameleons and things, they've managed to legally export all of these species. But you see, the problem with that also is they'll say it's this species, but then they'll export 5 other different species with those. And then who's going to know that it's not 5 species? It's, you see, so there's that problem. So I think like anywhere, like I mean, keepers or people that export, they're always going to find a way to jipper the system. I mean, for me now, if I had to try and send you guys something, I wouldn't know what to do. Like I'll probably be rejected with my first application. But then if you meet someone who knows how to do it or who has done it before, I think it can be quite easy.
Yeah, I believe there's Bushveld Reptiles who does they do house snakes, and they send over here, and then they have like an agent that sends out snakes over here. And then I know that there's like a big ball python breeder in South Africa who, I mean, it's just crazy that we are taking an African species and breeding it here and then exporting it. I mean, a different part of Africa, but still.
Yeah, but you see, like things like the exotics, it's relatively easy to get them sent around. It's just once they on the invasive species list, that it becomes quite difficult. Or obviously, if they're CITES listed, then it's quite difficult to get them around.
Yeah, and is there any like conservation efforts or cooperation between private hobbyists, stuff like that, or have you seen anything?
No, not that I really know of. Like you mean like captive breeding and things like that?
Like captive breeding programs, stuff like that.
No, there is a guy in I think it's Knysna, so like along the coast, like in the Cape, where he thinks he's breeding these chameleons to repopulate the wild populations and things. And like people are commending him for that, but other than that, they aren't really. Not that I know of people that use captive breeding or things to repopulate wild areas. I think a lot of those things are just like we call it like citizens or not citizens, pseudoscience actually, where guys do their own little projects where they'll try and breed as much as they can and release it, and they think they're repopulating, but actually, I mean, what that guy's doing is so little, and it might actually have a negative effect on the natural populations, because now you bring, I mean, this guy that's breeding these things, he probably has a lot of corn snakes and all these other things at home. So it's possible to take all those pathogens and release it into the natural environment. And then you potentially also just releasing a lot of inbred individuals into a natural environment.
You're also releasing, animals that were kept in a much more sterile environment to the wild, where they're going to catch the other pathogens, and they're
and the chances of those animals actually surviving is so small. I mean, there's a lot of studies on translocating snakes and reptiles that have shown that you move a clutch of rattlesnakes like 250 meters away from where they were caught or something, and more than 50% of them die. So, I mean, there's all these aspects. There's even like the guys who do these call outs. The theory is that you shouldn't be moving those snakes more than a couple hundred meters. And a lot of these guys, they go in and they catch these snakes and they think, I'm going to take it to the closest reserve, like 20 k's down the road. There's no people. There's nothing there to harm it. So the snake's going to be fine. Chances are that snake is actually just going to die. So, I mean, when you do call outs, the best thing is actually just to release it in the neighbor's garden. But obviously, we don't want to do that because the neighbor might find it. But that's, in theory, for the ecology or for the species or the animal itself, it's really better to just release that snake as close as possible to where you found it. I mean, that's like sometimes you find these.
How did we possibly
did we lose him?
After 2 hours. It's literally been 2 hours, but we can't end this with some grace. Damn it.
Oh, he's back.
He's back.
Maybe
not. Yeah, I think it's always an interesting topic when we talk about people who think that they're going to get into the private side of the hobby and help conservation,
and they're actually hurting it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no proper way to. You're never going to re-release an animal from your private collection.
No.
But I think, I mean, maybe what we can do is make a dent in, say, things that are very popular exports, things that are exploited, your things that are coming in mass to where we can just say, hey, we have a population here in the United States in captivity. No need to keep on exporting these animals. And even though they're captive born or captive bred, supposedly, only a certain amount of those animals hold true to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really like, there's no way to unfortunately, I mean, I wish there was a way, but no one's controlling us. We just have animals in tow.
It's just going to be impossible to ever like keep tabs on everyone who's doing things. And you just hope that the good, not necessarily good people, but people that are doing right by the animals outweigh the people that are, hurting it and everything. Oh, he's completely gone.
So hopefully you can just message him and ask him to follow the link again so we could do an outro.
I was just expecting him to
but I think it's
us.
Oh, he's coming back. I think it's just super I don't know, we're always interested on how they
the similarities. I think I wasn't expecting so many similarities.
It's pretty much like exactly the same, right?
There's a lot of similarities between us and South Africa. And I don't know. Yeah. There's lots of times whenever we have international guests, there's a lot of similarities. And I don't expect it. I expect it to like vastly different. Now, one thing we didn't talk about with him is like, but it's also hard because he's not in the captive world, but like shows or anything, I would guess that is very different. I'm thinking there's not reptile shows like we have here.
Maybe like Cape Town. Maybe there's, probably in the big.
That's just my guess. But I truly have no idea.
We have to have someone on the captive side as well from South Africa.
Yeah. Or maybe I would be interested. His friend who works for the venom supply.
I bet you that guy.
That would be very interesting.
Has a lot of stories.
We love good stories. So we'll definitely, after this podcast, have to reach out to Theo and be like, hey, look us up.
Yeah, because, I mean, you could only imagine with years of experience doing that every single day. It's like...
I mean, way
And
different
I guess, like, you're dispatching people to do it as well. So it's not even just you going out and doing it. It's other people coming back with crazy stories as well.
Right.
But it's also just fascinating the fact that, we couldn't think of a more crazy thing than like finding a black mamba and having to move it around. So, and it seems probably very routine
for him,
to those people, right?
And it's so funny to me how he was like, oh yeah, there's like kids doing call outs and being field guides and stuff. Now that is different.
Like Theo was a kid when he started.
That's one thing that's different. You're not going to see a 13-year-old, getting calls like, hey, will you come get the snake out of my yard? I mean, maybe in some parts of America, but not any part I know, and definitely not being a field guide in any sort of way.
I mean, it's hard to even find that many kids that young who are interested in stuff like that rather than, playing video games
and people don't
hanging out, which is
people don't respect kids.
Yeah, I mean, you always think of like the most the people that get the least respect, I guess, is the younger kids, teenagers, stuff like that, and they're trying their best, but they never really get the respect for their efforts because obviously you need it takes time to build that. But
okay, so he said the connection cut out and he says he's back on, but I see him.
Well,
I see the avatar.
Icon,
yeah. We see the blue icon.
Just tell him to keep on talking or saying something so that we know when he's here. But I mean, I would love to get like bush-veiled reptiles. I should reach out to I'm not sure what his name is. I wish I knew his name. So the ball python guy that I'm thinking of in South Africa, even though it's ball pythons and it's something that we don't. It is kind of weird that we don't cover ball pythons. I still want to do like a few ball python shows every year, but just learn about how that is taken off and how the market works in comparison to.
Oh, he's gone again. Sorry.
Yeah. How the market works in comparison money wise, like if more, because it's weird if you're importing from like Justin Cabell, like we started off with one pastel, one normal, breed it, and then you built on over like 15 years, then we started getting crazy. over there, it's like you have the keys to the kingdom. You know, you can, hey, Justin Kabelka, give me the. I have $50,000. I want the best projects, and you start from the top. And so I think that's interesting in how that affects how that would affect that market in comparison to one that's mature like ours and came kind of from the ground up. Yeah, that's weird that he's just coming up as an icon.
I know, and I kept trying to show him like what we see, but then he goes away when I try to connect. There he is! Yay! Took a couple tries to come back, but you did it.
I'm back. Yeah, I know the connection cut out, so now I'm on my phone, and okay, it's working.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes pretty much before we're about to do an outro, and
but hey, we got the main meat of it. I don't even remember what was he saying when it cut out. What were we talking about? I already forgot.
I can't even remember.
What are you talking about? You should.
I have no idea because I just started rambling.
We started rambling,
to make
right?
Up time.
It was about reptiles, import, export, something like
that. Theo, if someone wanted to reach out to you,
I wanted to ask one more closing question
before we do that. Okay, ask your question.
Is there any animal or herp in South Africa that you have been looking for, hope to see, but you have not gotten to see yet?
Oh, no, I'm going to look like a noob to the people who have seen it. I think the things that everybody's chasing is kind of the dwarf adders. I mean, there's like the Albany adders, the desert mountain adder. Well, I've seen that one. I think those are kind of the big ones that people want to see. And then there's a really big one. You get it in Lesotho and the Drakensberg Mountains. It's the cream spotted mountain snake. So basically that one, I think there's like 5 records of it that anyone has ever seen. So I think one day when I find that one, I'll be a very, very happy guy.
I've never even heard of a cream spotted mountain snake, but now we have to look at it.
Right. So you can. I think that's the common name. I don't always get the common names right.
Is it, how do you say it? Montaspis?
Montaspis, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like it's a black snake.
I mean, like it doesn't look like much, but that's certainly one of the top goals. A lot of people have gone to try and find it, and they just can't get it. So I think that, like, I mean, I'm all about the snakes. The other reptiles are cool, but like I like finding snakes. I mean, and you always want to find something that no one else has found. So that is definitely the top goal to one day get it.
Yeah, it's fun to see the fact that it doesn't always matter what the animal looks like. It can have to do with just the rarity of the animal itself.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the competitiveness, just beating the guys that have been trying, and then you can get it. But I mean, for that one, it's actually whoever gets it. I mean, first of all, they're very lucky, and then second of all, no one knows where the snake fits in on like the phylogeny or the genetics. There's no genetic sample for the snake. So for science, whoever finds the next one and is able to take a tail tip or a scale, or I mean, hopefully they find a dead one so there can be another one in the museum. But it would be a very, very important find for science in general.
Yeah, how does that go? You know, say we found 5 of them in 20 years or something, right? And then a herpetologist, in order to do with proper research, you have to euthanize the animal. I mean, what's the situation there? Like, do you always euthanize the animal in order to do proper research, or would you let it go depending?
No, so it depends. Like with me working on the Natal black snake, there are a lot of them in the museums. So there's a lot of specimens to work on. Anything with the specimens in the museums, you can't do genetics on them because a lot of them are preserved in formalin. So formalin destroys the genetics. So you need fresh tissue. So for them, you can just go and take a small ventral scale or a tail tip, and you can do your genetic analyses, and then you can go back and look at other specimens for the morphological analyses. But something like this, the Montaspis, they we don't have genetics for them. We only have 5 specimens in the museum. We don't know anything about how the snake works, how many there are, how big the population is. And the main reason we don't know is because the habitat is just inaccessible. So by being able to kind of, work on the snake, you are, I mean, it's sometimes I don't like it either to euthanize something cool that I found. And I don't euthanize so many, but it kind of needs to be done for the science. And by now, for example, like the little black snakes that I'm working on, because there are so many in museums and things, and like a lot of these are roadkill, and this is where roadkill and citizen science can be an important factor, because you've got all these things that you can work on. And so now we don't have to collect anymore. We've got all these specimens. So yeah, I mean, specimens are very important for science. So at some point, you're going to have specimens in a museum so you can work with them. And I mean, I've had comments where people tell me, well, why don't you just work on a live snake? It's not that easy to count a million scales like down the body on live snakes. Yeah, you kind of need those references in the lab or in the museums and so on. But yeah, I mean, for a rare snake like that we know nothing about, it's very important to get those genetic samples so that you can, know where the snake goes. You can know more about it. You can know more about its ecology by looking at maybe things that it's more closely related to. And even so, you might even find new habitats based on this knowledge where it could possibly be. And by that, you can set up a profile, set up a range, and you can do like IUCN assessments, basically how threatened it would be or endangered status and so on, just by finding out more about it. But now we know nothing. We don't know if it's endangered. We don't know how rare it is, just because there are just too few samples to look at.
And have you gotten the opportunity to get into its habitat?
No. I've been planning on making a trip there, here and there, like mentioning it to some of my good friends. But no, I've been there, close to it when I was a kid, before I even knew the snake existed. But let's see, maybe after my Dubai excursion, I can come back with some money and plan a trip.
Sell that Lamborghini and get someone to get you
that
in
oil
there.
money up there.
Yeah.
Yourself a snake. That's awesome, man. So if anyone wants to reach out with you, check you out on social media, where can they find you?
I think the easiest would be Instagram. So Bush_Cow. And I mean, I've got a little Facebook page going as well. So you can just search my name, Theo Busschau. I think it's called something like that. But you'll find it. I'm the only Theo Busschau, so you'll find my page there. So basically, there I'll just share some of my research, share some photos, and maybe some cool things that I've seen or whatever. I haven't been paying too much attention to that just because Instagram and the phone is so much easier. But definitely Instagram. I mean, it's quite easy. I get the messages on my phone.
Perfect. And as far as we go, PortCityPythons.com.
Port City Pythons on Facebook.
Port City Pythons on Instagram. It sounds like we planned this.
Yeah, like 100+ times.
We also have, we will have animals available shortly. Of course, Patreon sees our animals hatch first. So if you're interested in that, and we're also going to have Patreon exclusive, animals and stuff like that, different things. And we're trying to create more content just to keep you guys in the loop, as well as just getting the corn snake love out there into the universe.
Corn snake love.
Yeah, that sounds lame, doesn't it?
Yes. But thank you, Theo, for coming on and sitting through fire alarm noises to talk to us and everything. I'm sure it was much louder for you than it was for us. Thankfully, it stopped kind of early in the podcast. And thank you for everyone who listened and who will listen on the audio version later. We will see you guys next week.
Later, guys.
Theo, we will still be on with you after we cut out.
Okay, awesome.